Let's define prophecy. Prophecy has two dimensions. Prophecy is foretelling and forthtelling. Foretelling is what you would, what you think of prophecy normally. Foretelling is just knowing the future. And let me say this. I believe that prophecy has three dimensions in foretelling. It has foresight, oversight, and insight. Foresight, oversight, and insight. That's not in your manual. But I believe that prophetic people move in three dimensions. Foresight, the ability to see the future. Insight, the ability to know what's driving the future or driving a culture. And oversight. Oversight is the ability to have spiritual perception of where things lie relative to other things. People that have good oversight, for instance, prophetic oversight. I'm not talking about I'm an overseer. I'm not talking about being an overseer. I'm not talking about being a leader who has oversight. I'm talking about the gift of prophecy that has oversight as its dimension. Are you with me? Maybe it'd be easier if I describe it this way. The eye of the Lord, the prophecy is being able to see and hear in God, right? If I can just use this as an example, some prophetic people have a telescope for an eye. They can see a long ways off. But typically a person who has prophetic foresight, who can see a long ways off into the future, doesn't typically have prophetic insight. Because prophetic insight is like a microscope. It's like having an eye, a microscope for an eye. It's the ability to see. You know, have you ever looked at your skin under a microscope? There are things living there. It's gross. And people that have prophetic insight can tell you what is driving motives, motivations, not necessarily negative. Are you with me? They can look into the heart of matters through their prophetic gift. And people that have oversight, they are people, in my mind, who are like looking, like if you've ever flown, I think I shared this with you, if you've ever flown over your house in a helicopter, it works in a plane too. My friend has a helicopter and we flew over my house. And I looked at my house and it's amazing to see your house in perspective with everything else. It's one thing to drive on a road. It's another thing to hover right above your house and go, oh my goodness, I didn't know the golf course was that close. And that's what oversight, prophetic oversight does. It's people who can take people and go, you fit right here. Like they see this big picture, not necessarily the far away picture, but they see the big picture. And they go, John belongs over here. That's the struggle. That's why he's not successful, because he needs to be over here. And people that have prophetic oversight are usually really good at overseeing organizations, running prophetically, giving prophetic perspective to organizations, because they have a good idea where people belong and what roles, because they can prophetically take that helicopter and move up above an organization, and they can tell you things about perspective. They can put things in perspective. There are people that have all three dimensions, in my opinion, but it's pretty uncommon, because what gives you really good foresight usually restricts your insight. What gives you really good insight typically restricts your foresight. And that's not for everyone, but I'm just telling you that the people that I know that are really good at telling you the future are typically don't have a clue what's going on in the present. Prophetically, I mean. And so, prophecy is about foretelling. It's about telling the future. But it's also forthtelling. Forthtelling means I'm causing the future. I've probably told you the story before, but there was a young man, he was sitting right back there, almost to those back doors, in a Sunday night meeting. And I called him out, and I said, I see you as a holy man. And it was on a Sunday night. I see you as a holy man, like you're one of like the holy men of old. And I gave him this whole prophecy about being a holy man, and it was about 4 or 5 minutes long, about how the holy men of old were in the Old Testament. They were like Nazarites, and God was just using them as examples of his holiness and so on and so forth. Well, it turns out that the guy was a heroin addict. But when I called him a holy man, something came into him and he was instantly delivered. What happened? He received the prophet's reward. If you receive a prophet in the name of a prophet, then you receive the prophet's reward. What is the prophet's reward? And we've talked about this earlier. A prophet's reward is the ability to do what you couldn't do 1 second before you received the prophecy. What makes a prophecy a prophecy? A prophecy isn't a prophecy because you sound like Shakespeare, or you yell, or you're dramatic, or you say, "Thus saith the Lord." In fact, I want to say this. The more you have to say, "Thus saith the Lord," the more I think it's probably not the Lord. Just like if I had to say to you, "I'm a man. I'm a real man." Probably I'm dealing with some insecurity. If every time you met me I said, "Hey, I'm Kris, I'm great." See, praying in Jesus' name doesn't mean that you add Jesus' name on the end of your prayer. It means that you know that you're in submission to His mission, so you've been commissioned. So when you pray, you're praying as Jesus prayed because you're on His mission. And prophesying, it's fine to say, "Thus saith the Lord." Some of you raised in that culture where you have to say that. Whatever, doesn't bother me. But what makes a prophecy is this. When you're speaking, let's pretend for a minute that your words are red. Your human words are red. But if it's a prophecy, on the red is blue. And the blue is the ability to make the red happen. The blue is called grace. Grace is not just undeserved favor. Grace is the operational power of God. So what makes a prophecy is that there's blue on the red. You can be sitting with somebody in a conversation and just having a conversation over lunch, and suddenly you sense the Spirit of the Lord is on this conversation. What's happening? You begin to talk to them about what God says. But here's what's really important. You can be giving them great counsel through the gift of counsel. And it's really good. It's all good. But then something happens and it shifts into a prophetic declaration. What shifts? Suddenly, on the red, your words. They're still hearing you. They're still experiencing your personality. They're still experiencing your persona. They're still experiencing all of you. But in the middle of that experience, there starts to be the blue. And the blue gives them the ability to do what the red said. I've used this example over and over. I really like this one example because of how dramatic it was when it happened. This pastor came and said, "Can you prophesy over my team?" This is during a conference. They were from Los Angeles area. "Can you prophesy over my team? There's about 8 of us." I said, "Sure, bring them up." So it was husband and wife teams, and I'll never forget, they were standing right here. And so I started to minister to the first couple, husband and wife couple. And I start with the woman, and I said, "I see you singing songs. I see you writing songs, and I see you playing guitar and leading worship." Well, before I can get to like the second thing, like I see you singing, and when I go to the second thing, she goes, wait, no, that's not me. It's my husband. She said, "I'm tone deaf, but my husband's the worship leader in our church." I go, "Lady, shut up." I said, "Do you know what a prophecy is?" She said, "I guess I don't." I said, "A prophecy is about the future, and if you believe this prophecy, it will give you the ability to do what you couldn't do 1 second before you heard the prophecy." She said, "Well, do me again." I said, "All right." So and I prophesied to her, and it was longer, but the 3 basic points were, I see you singing, I see you leading worship, writing songs, and playing guitar. And she said, all right, I received that for myself. I said, good. So about 8 or 9, 10 months later, another conference, I meet this person at the back of the sanctuary. She said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "No, honestly, I'm sorry, I don't." She said, "You prophesied over me." I said, "I prophesy over hundreds of people a year." She said, "You told me to shut up." I'm thinking, well, that narrowed it down to about 3 or 4. But as soon as she said, I said, "Oh, I remember you. Your pastor brought your whole team up." She said, "Yeah," and then she repeated the prophecy. She said, "You told me I was going to lead worship, I was going to play guitar, I was going to write songs." I said, "I remember that." And she said, "Remember I told you I was tone deaf?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "As soon as I left the meeting," she said, "my tone deafness left." She said, Within 3 months, I learned to play guitar. She said, I've written several songs, and I lead worship in our 500-member Vineyard Church on Sunday. What happened? She got the blue on the red. She got grace. She got the ability to do what she couldn't do 1 second before she heard the word. Are you getting this? Now, what would happen if she would have walked away going, instead of saying, that was my husband, let's say that she did what most people do, and they just keep their mouth shut, and they walk away going, boy, that prophetic person's, their ministry sucks, you know? How many of you know she wouldn't have learned to play guitar? She wouldn't have learned to sing. She would have remained tone deaf. Why? Because she had to add her faith. Remember Romans 12. She had to add her faith to get the grace that was on the red so she could get the blue. That's really important.